Hello, everybody. This is Bart Sharp, and you are on Becoming Quantum Conscious at United Public Radio Network and UFO Paranormal Radio Network at 107.7 and 105.3. And you can also catch us on the UPRN website at uprn.com, cable television on Roku, Facebook, YouTube, X. And the big news today for me is I'm back in Austin, Texas. Wow. Flew in Saturday and it's like, what happened? It's always interesting to get the feel of what Austin is compared to lovely Southwest France. Uh, if you were to take it to a theme, you'd say, oh, energy is just energy, because Southwest France is all of these power spots and ancient lands going back to probably beyond the Atlanteans, my guess, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of years old, possibly. Some of the sites indicate something very, very old. Saw one that we figured was 20,000 years old the other day. And here you had this nice, new, fresh nation called the United States, and Austin, Texas is just bubbling with ideas and possibilities. And the energy is very powerful here. It's just a different energy. It's the people that make it so rich, I think, and maybe other things there. Not to knock the French people, I love them. But the Americans are just a little bit more starstruck with possibilities of what they can create in their lives or business or whatever they're creating. And that's always fun to be around. Always got to look about, what is that best possibility that any environment offers you. And boy, today we're going to outer space. And I mean literally outer space with Jeff Carriera. And I'm going to bring on Jeff right now. Hi, Jeff.
Hey there. Hi, Bart. How are you?
Oh, so good. And we are going into outer space today because we're talking about transdimensional spirituality and also Jeff's previous book, The Path of Spiritual Consciousness.
Cosmic
And
consciousness.
yes, I think I got that a lot wrong the last time you were on the show. See, that's what space does to you. You go out into this bigger consciousness that's wider than anything that your previous experiences know, and therefore you trip and stumble over small details like people's names and titles of books and things like that. However, a different type of wisdom shows up when you're into the cosmic transdimensional consciousness. Would you not agree with that concept, Jeff?
Definitely. I think we gain greater access to our innate capacities or the innate capacities for knowing that exist in this universe that normally we only have access to a small portion of what's possible.
Yes. Like the normal, mundane brain waves and neural patterns. The brain is such an interesting thing because it wants to go and habitually do the same things. It wants you to brush your teeth the same way, drive to the store on the same route because it's easier. You don't have to use as much energy. We think about, oh, that's just unconsciousness, but it's also a habit. It's something our brain wants to do because it's about efficiency. And yet, you're all about expanding to something so far beyond, stretching your brain out, stretching your body out. I mean, what does that feel like to be you, to be able to basically travel to these places? How does your body feel when you do that?
Uh, Energetically alive, uh, excited, um, I use the term transdimensional uh, because we live in a we live in a reality of three dimensions of space and linear time, and we see ourselves as a thing, a three-dimensional thing that lives through linear time. And obviously, that's a good thing in many ways, right? If I want to meet you for coffee tomorrow, it's really good if I treat myself as a linear thing that's going to need to move through time to get there. Um, but that's only a small part of what's possible. Uh, Normally, what we think about as growth, personal growth, or even transformation, it means it's all happening within the human sphere of concern. It's all happening in the domain of three dimensions of space and time. That's one way we could characterize it. It's all happening within our understanding of what it means to be a human being. So we have a very strong understanding of what it means to be a human being. Human beings are capable of doing these things, we're not capable of doing these things. And because that's how we see ourselves, and because those are the deep-seated beliefs that we hold, we are not able to do these things, and we are not able, and we are able to do these things. That's just how it works. We
Yeah.
our our, our assumptions of possibility and limitation defines what we experience as real. Uh, and so the idea of transdimensional spirituality is that whatever we are, which is not limited to a physical person, but whatever is that which is aware through me and that which is aware through you, is capable of much more than just what can happen through this physical human organism. And to discover that, we have to relax our exclusive commitment to being human. We have to be willing to relax our exclusive commitment to being human. We need to open to the possibility that we are more than human. We still
And
are human, but we are more than human. And when we do that, we start to realize very quickly that we are already having experiences of the impossible, that we are simply filtering out of our consciousness, as quickly as they arise.
so true. And so much research has been done around just the heart alone, that it stretches out and can pick up anything around the planet. And we haven't really understood what the brain can do in those capacities, yet alone the human body as a total being. But when we study things like the Egyptians in the ancient Egyptian chematology, which we'll be having um, Hakeem Awan on in a couple of weeks, who will be going into the chematology. But he's saying they had a relationship with the civilizations in the Sirius A and Sirius B star systems, that there was this direct communication going on. Of course, those folks were probably down on the planet at the same time, teaching them, and at the same time they were traveling there. So it's there's a lot of recorded experiences of exactly what you're talking about with people, 10,000 years ago. And it's
Mm,
been happening all along, but it's kind of gotten secretive. We're not talking about it anymore.
right.
And here you
Right.
are talking about it.
Well, that's the secretiveness, the secretive nature of these things occurs because the dominant paradigm, at least in the Western world and becoming more so globally, the dominant paradigm is scientific materialism, which means a science based on a materialistic understanding of reality, which says that the foundation of reality, what the primary essence or element of reality is matter, is stuff, is
Mm-hmm.
is sensible stuff, and that's what's ultimately real. And then there's a science that gets built on that assumption. That's the science of stuff. It's the science of how material interactions occur and the laws that govern material interactions, things like, how heat creates change in material things and how gravity creates change in material things. And that's been an amazing science for a few hundred years now in the West and has led to enormous, incalculable advances in our technology. And because it was so enormously successful, I mean, I don't think any of us can imagine life 500 years ago compared to life today. I mean, the level of technology has recreated human life, uh, and we enjoy things today that kings and queens couldn't enjoy. You know,
Yes.
we have fruit available to us 365 days a year. Why? Because it may not be in season where we are, but it's in season somewhere, and we have transportation that can get it to us fast
Yes.
enough that it can be fresh. So it's hard to imagine the benefits of science. At the same time, uh, it was so popular, so successful that it became that we moved from scientific materialism to what's called scientism, which scientism is a word that basically means science is the only truth, or the truth of science, of our materialist science, is the only truth, and everything else is sort of woo woo, not worthy of serious consideration. Uh,
As
and
a
there was a
friend,
battle over this,
yes,
150 years ago, but science won that it was a PR battle, and science won the PR battle, and probably we all benefited from that. I don't know, but that's why there's such secretiveness, because this is looked at with derision in
yes.
in mainstream scientific materialist dominated thinking.
As a friend of mine says, there's two different worlds. There's the seen world, and there's the unseen world.
Hmm.
And we're definitely swimming in the unseen world, and
That's
how
right.
it changes and affects everything. And it's in such subtle ways. You can't really say, oh, my expansion into this higher consciousness where my body feels expanded, I feel ecstatic, I feel joy and bigger than life almost. How does that affect my practical world? Well, it's not something that you can define linear, but in my life, it just seems like things happen, and I can't explain them. Why I'm so lucky in so many things, but to me, that's a lot where the correlation is. I'm an
Yes.
expanded human being, and things seem to come. And you were really talking about this in the book of like learning to just to let go of that. um, Surrender is the word that you kept using. Surrender, and then turn to illumination. And you would
Mm.
surrender that, think that, well, maybe my understanding of God is not so practical by a scripture or a text, but let's actually see what God feels like. And there's a surrender, maybe, that you're open to that possibility. And
Right.
that's oh, something starts to show up
Yes.
unexpectedly.
There's so many ways that the word surrender is valuable in spiritual work. Not everyone loves the word surrender. I understand that. I also use the word relax. That's a little more palatable. Letting go. Some people find that more palatable, but they all basically mean the same thing, at least when I use them. Uh, but the idea to me of spiritual work is, so we can use your language, is there is an unseen world. There is a spiritual reality within which our material reality it also exists and arises. And we exist in both. We don't, we're not only material beings. We have higher spiritual experiences, and people have them all the time. I mean, uh, now in a materialist, from a materialist point of view, if you have a higher spiritual experience, that's going to tend to be seen as some kind of brain phenomena, like something lit up in your brain that's not normal. Um, might even be considered a bad thing. Depends on the outcome, but it's still subsumed within the materialist viewpoint by saying that uh, it's somehow emerging out of something that's happening with the brain, which is a material thing. Uh, but when we start to realize that there's a world beyond the material, there are influences in this material realm that are not originating from the material realm, that they are coming from, you could call it from a spiritual dimension. Ancient times they said it was coming from heaven. I prefer the term higher dimensions of reality because it sounds more, I don't know, scientific, I guess. And I like the sound of it. When you start to open to those, you want to be moved by the higher dimensions of your being. You want your mind to be moved. You want your heart to be moved. Ultimately, you even want your body to be moved by these higher movements of spirit, which are running through you all the time, but they're not as loud as what's emanating from the material world. So you have to let go.
Mm.
You have to relax and relax and relax so much that everything gets very quiet. And then when everything's very quiet, you start to be able to feel the movements of spirit within you. And so how does that shows up in the mind as a intuitive wisdom that isn't something you deduce. It's just something that occurs to you. Spiritual feelings, blissful feelings of a completely different nature. So many things that you start to become aware of and then can start to align yourself with. That's to me what it means to be engaged in spiritual life.
Mm. That's wonderful. And so, everybody has a different terminology of relax. What's relax for you? What do you do to get to those places? And I'm sure this has developed over the years, but what guidance can you give to people that maybe are just starting out? Maybe some of
Absolutely.
your advanced stuff that you do? Because I, like anybody that's in this field of evolution, we our techniques change.
Yes, definitely. Well, I will share with you what I consider to be the great secret of relaxation.
Hmm.
Okay. So here's the great secret, Bart. Relaxed is what you already are before you do anything.
Hmm.
So relaxed isn't something you're going to get to. Relaxed is something you're going to remember. Your inherent nature is perfectly relaxed. So the challenge with any practice that involves relaxation or surrender or letting go is we are going to assume that we need to do something to relax. But doing something to relax is not relaxing. That's doing. That's more busy. So no matter what you do to relax, you're doing more, not less. And so what you need to discover is how to not do anything. And even more than not doing anything, because when I would teach, for instance, the first part everybody gets. You just say anything you're doing to relax is another doing, and it's just more doing. It's never going to lead to relaxing. You can't do something to relax. Relaxing means not doing. Okay, so people tend to get that. Then when you say, okay, but not doing doesn't mean stopping either, because stopping is not relaxing. It's another form of doing. And that's where it gets harder for people to understand. What do you mean? Well, if I'm busy and I'm anxious, I need to stop being busy and stop being anxious in order to relax. Now, this is very interesting. So if I'm busy and if I'm anxious is the way that phrase starts. There's an assumption that I am busy, I am anxious, right? But you're not. I am relaxed. I am peace. And so if you don't do anything, you don't become relaxed. You discover that you always were.
Yes.
There's a part of us that is always relaxed, that's always at ease, and that always has been a passive witness to everything that occurred.
Mm.
And within that peaceful, relaxed, pure awareness, doing starts. And then doing generates tension, generates anxiety, generates all kinds of things. But before any of the doing starts, you are already perfectly at peace.
Mm. When
And
you
and
when,
the more, yes, go ahead.
when you talk about that, what really turns on for me is really down below my second chakra, between my second chakra and my perineum, kind of in a space there that just feels like that's what speaks. That's the space for me that uh, has that peace, that
Yes,
relaxation.
definitely. That the root of your being, which is where everything else emerges from. I once was sitting at a fountain. I was in Manhattan, and I was watching this fountain uh, spraying, and it's all busy, right? There's water spraying out of the fountain, and then I let my attention, I just started to focus on the spot where the water was first emerging. And I was just looking at exactly that place, not everything that was spraying all over the place that became chaos. And I realized that if I just look at that very place of emergence, it looks really still and calm. And I thought it's a great metaphor for the emergence of a human being. The place where you are emerging from the unseen world, the unmanifest world, that place where you first emerge into manifestation before you've done anything, before you've thought anything, before you've felt anything, is pure peace and calm.
Mm,
And that isn't something that happened on your birthday. That's happening in every single moment. You're emerging from the unmanifest in every moment. So that place of pure peace is always available
mm.
as long as that's where you put your attention.
It sounds like this kind of come up for me recently. One of the greatest powers is just that nothingness that holds there. There's no, almost, we'll break the scientific terms. There's no mass density, but there's just space.
Mhm.
And we can't really scientifically say that, oh, yes, the body has a place where there's just space of nothingness. However, I really do believe that that exists at some level, maybe some interdimensional place, that there is a nothingness in us.
Mm.
And it's super powerful. Does that seem to be similar to what you're saying?
Definitely. Um, so the way that I would want to say that, because the interesting thing about thinking about nothingness is that we tend to equate nothingness with space, right?
Yes.
So we think of empty space, but empty space is still something. It's not actually nothing. Um, so the way that I would want to think about that is there's traditionally throughout human history, there's been two fundamental ways that people relate to the nature of reality. It's either a materialist point of view, which says that matter is the universe is made of matter and the interactions and energy and forces between matter, or there's an idealist point of view, which says reality is a mind, and that everything in reality is a product of the mind, of the universal mind. That was really the dominant way of understanding reality until a few hundred years ago. Through most of human history, that's how it was seen, and God was seen as the mind. He was the mind, and we were children of God because we were all products of that mind. So what that means practically is I can look at you and the world around me as if it's matter that exists in three-dimensional space, made up of physical things. Now, the interesting thing about physical substances, uh, we all believe that physical substance is real, but if you look at physics, you can't find physical substance. We're looking for, well, what's the actual substance in physical substance, and we can't find it. And every time we find a good candidate, we find out, well, that one's made up of even smaller candidates. And so we're not actually finding any matter in matter. That aside, I can look at all of this as real material stuff, or I can look at all of this as more like a dream.
So that's what you're kind of connecting to, is that, if I
Yes,
understand you correctly. And that's kind of beyond time and space, I'm guessing.
utterly beyond time and space.
Hmm.
Now, think about a dream you have at night when you're in your bed. And, I've had some dreams in which enormous amounts of time seem to pass. But when I wake up, I realize I wasn't actually asleep as long as that dream seemed to last, right? I was kind of in a much longer dream than I could hold. I've had dreams about sailing on the ocean. When I wake up, I realize there's no actual ocean, right? There's no room inside my body for an ocean. So dreams don't happen. They exist in a dimension beyond time and space. They and what what uh, what many traditions will tell you, but certainly the Hindu tradition will tell you, is that this material reality that we appear to live in is no different than any other dream, except it's longer lasting and more persistent. But besides that, it's the same substance. It's still a dream. Uh, and to the extent that you begin to realize that this is an experience, and you relax the assumption that it's matter. And I don't want to say that's wrong, because in a lot of ways it works. I'm a pragmatist, so I say go with what works. So
Yes.
if you're if you're building new technology for transportation, use the materialist viewpoint because it works for that.
Hmm.
But if you want to travel interdimensionally to the unseen world, the assumption that the only real world is the material one isn't going to help you. The realization that this is an experienced reality helps you, because if you can experience this reality, you can experience a different one.
That sounds like one of the first steps if you really want to let go of this, because you've been talking about that earlier. It's like, well, it's all out there, but we're so stuck into that this is the reality, and we believe it
Yes,
so firmly that it's almost like an unwillingness to look beyond it. And before
absolutely.
before we go on any farther, we're at midpoint, and I wanted to tell everybody that you are listening to Jeff Carriera, and he is the author of Transdimensional Spirituality, his newest book. When we're talking along these same lines, and it's a lot of themes that Jeff covers through meditation and spiritual work, but also along with this really cool book. Jeff sent me the other copy via email because I was in France and I didn't have a paper copy, but he
Here
sent
you
me
go. I have
his
one.
copy, and here we go. Uh, the Path of cosmic consciousness and transdimensional spirituality. I
There
found
you
Jeff
go.
on Amazon and actually calling, sending him an email, and we've created a relationship together through this interaction. Um, so Jeff can be found on www.jeffcarriera.com, and it's Carriera.
EI. Carreira.
RAW, and it's Portuguese, by the way. And there it is, and you can check out. I'll ask you this question in a minute. I need to give the call letters here. You are on Becoming Quantum Conscious. My name is Bart Sharp, and this is the United Public Radio Network and UFO Paranormal Radio Network at 107.7 and 105.3 out of New Orleans, Louisiana. And you can catch us on the UPRN website, cable television with Roku, Spreaker, X, Facebook, and YouTube. And we're with Jeff Carriera. And Jeff, how can people get in touch with you and what you're doing beyond these books?
Well, the best way is to use my website, which you just said. It's my name, Jeff Carrera, Carreira.com. I have lots of YouTube videos up. If you go to my site, I have lots of audios. I have a lot of free material, so you can get a good sense of who I am just by visiting my site and clicking around a little bit. I would say that's the best way.
Mm. And we have Phyllis Memo on the here. It says, only if appropriate to mention, where does parallel universe enter into this discussion? Let's start the show with that. Thanks, Phyllis. Got an
That's
answer
a
for
great
that one?
question. You know, parallel universe is a very fascinating idea. Uh, and it's important with any idea like parallel universes to hold it somewhat metaphorically. You know, we can't get too literal. We can get too literal about things. But parallel universes is a very interesting theory that uh, was developed, and it was developed to help explain some of the results of quantum mechanics experiments in the 50s, actually. So there were two dominant explanations. So there was the Copenhagen explanation, which said, oh, well, the reason why there's uncertainty, because that was the big problem, that was things were uncertain. You didn't know what something was going to be till you measured it. And depending on how you measured it, it could be different. So in the Copenhagen explanation, which became the dominant one, said, well, everything exists as a field of possibility until the moment of measuring, and then it all collapses into uh, the reality that we experience. A competing, an alternative explanation was really more about uh, the multiple universe model, which said, well, there's actually many universes, and when we measure something, the way that we measure it puts us in one of those versus another.
Hmm.
That we're moving from one universe to the next. They're both pretty far fetched because the quantum theory is difficult to explain, but I think the multiverse explanation over the last 10 or 20 years has kind of been making a comeback. Uh,
Hmm.
and of course, we see it in popular fiction. Uh, and so I would say it relates to what I'm speaking about.
Yeah, I have a fairy model with that. In other words, I was walking in a forest with plenty of fairies. Phyllis Mim knows it. It's called Nebulous Forest. And the strangest things appear in my consciousness, almost like the trees and the fairies tell me. And literally, you can pick up fairies and they'll jump in your hand. Yeah, I can't see them, but I feel them. But they said that it was in between our solar plexus and heart, and it to me they gave me a vision of a almost like a crystal ball with all of these facets, and every facet represented a universe, and that they all kind of work together.
Yeah.
Uh, that we function in many places at once, and they can all work together. They're a collective consciousness. Now, I don't travel through that, but it's almost like an energetic subchakra. Now,
Mm.
that's a wild and crazy theory, but that's what the fairies told me. And I've worked with that energetically. I'm a big believer that unseen information shows up, and it might be just our own reality, but it still has validity until it doesn't.
Mm.
Um, but I don't know, interesting point of view with that one. Uh,
Very interesting.
yeah,
One last thought about parallel universes for Phyllis. Usually, when we think of parallel universes, we think about them in the way that they're portrayed in things like Marvel Comics movies. That
yes.
they are slightly altered copies of the universe we live in now. Um, and so I would be myself in this universe, but then in some other universe, I'd be a different version of myself, et cetera, et cetera. I think I could go with that. That seems plausible to me, although I don't have any direct evidence of it. I guess what I'm interested in beyond parallel universes is uh, those higher dimensions of reality beyond three-dimensional space and time altogether, which I think is what in ancient times they spoke about as the heavenly realms or the angelic
Mm,
realms, where there are completely different kinds of life forms that aren't constrained by three dimensions of space and time, that live in a completely different way. I've been reading a lot of Emanuel Swedenborg book recently, and he spent a lot of time conversing with angels, uh, and he came up with a lot of very fascinating. I don't know if he came up with these. He says he was told them by the angels. So one way or the other, he recorded a lot of fascinating ideas about how reality operates in the angelic realms, in which there is no time and there is no space, and yet there are still beings. But as he says, beings in those higher realms, and this makes total sense to me, they aren't physical beings because there's no time and space in those realms. They exist as states of consciousness. So there's a state of consciousness which is the angelic version of me. And
mm.
that a state of consciousness, it doesn't exist in a body, it's an essence that exists everywhere. It's like a scent in the air.
You this really segues into this great quote you have in your book, The Path of Cosmic Consciousness. I'm very aware that every time I pronounce the name of this book previously on the show, I was messing it up. But that was because I was too spacey. Being around Jeff, even though he's somewhere in some other state, New York, right? Or someplace like that?
I'm in New Jersey.
New Jersey. Okay, so we're hundreds of miles away, but yet I get real spacey in his presence, which means that he has an expansive consciousness. He expands me in places that I'm not expanded in. He's taken a few trips, folks, and I'm not talking with pills or planes. He does it through a lot of his trances and work that he teaches people how to do this type of stuff, if I understand you correctly. But this quote is: the cosmos is a single living entity that is growing as a whole. In this majestic view, we see our own personal spiritual growth as part of the growth of the entire cosmos. We are the cosmos evolving. That just blows me away. I believe it 100%. What can you share about that?
Uh, well, so we're always speaking metaphorically, of course. So metaphorically, if you think of the cosmos as a singular entity, it's a little bit like a human body, right? Um, the human body is growing as a whole, even physically, from say childhood to adulthood. As part of that growth, my hand grows, my arm grows, my ears grow, my everything grows. But it's all part of the growth of the universe. Or sorry, in this case, it's all part of the growth of the body. So one of the things I like to use as a way to start to feel what it means to be a part of the universe, not a thing in the universe, but an actual part of the universe is uh, there's a couple of ways that I do this, but I'll do it this way today because I'm talking. But if you look at my mouth, so Bart, I want you to just look at my mouth. Don't look at any other part of me. Just look at my mouth,
On it.
and you will notice that it keeps talking and it says things, and some of the things that it says are quite clever. So it's kind of a smart mouth, and you can see it just keeps talking and talking and talking. Imagine if I thought that it was my mouth that my mouth was the intelligent being on my face, and it was my mouth that was doing the talking. Now we know that's not the case. We know that that mouth is just a mouth, and the words coming through it don't belong to the mouth. They belong to Jeff. They're Jeff's words coming through the mouth. The mouth is just the instrument that says them. So we know that for sure with a mouth. When we think about ourselves, we think we're intelligent. We think it's Jeff's mind. We think it's Jeff's intelligence. We don't realize no, this is the universe's intelligence. It's just being spoken through a human body. So the Jeff of me, the humanness of me is to the universe what my mouth is to this physical body. I am
Mm.
an instrument of the universe. What I express to you as intelligence or wisdom is not mine. I can't generate intelligence or wisdom. I receive it from the universe. We live in an intelligent universe, which is a singular entity that is growing, not just physically growing, but it's growing in mind. It's becoming more subtle. It's becoming wiser. It's becoming more compassionate and more loving. It's manifesting more of all of those qualities. And our spiritual path in which we work to express more and more of those qualities in our human lives is part of the growth of the whole universe. It's one of the ways that the universe continues to grow and continues to expand and continues to learn and continues to transform.
Yummy. That's a wonderful answer. And to ask another question, if we are doing this and we are expanding, how does it affect the people around us?
Oh, well, absolutely, because it's all one event, right? The whole universe is growing. So our growth is supporting the growth of the whole universe. Now, it's a
Mm.
big universe, so you may not see a direct uh, you may not see the influence directly because it's big, but you can be sure that in some larger sense it's helping. Now, also in a smaller sense, in our local sense, the more that we become a more deeply wise, compassionate, loving person, that has a huge effect on the people around us, just because of the way we interact with them. Because the world that we live in needs so much love and compassion and support. And our spiritual growth increases our capacity to bring those qualities into the world. I feel like it's utterly essential in the
Hmm.
world that more and more of us increase our capacity for love and wisdom.
Wonderful. Another question along this line. I just keep poking and prodding you. How has it changed you? Because you've been doing this for 30 plus years. If you could take Jeff, and when you talk about this in your book, you talk about a childhood experience where you're looking into a mirror and you're looking at your eyes, and suddenly you go into outer space, and it was teaching you how to space travel. So naturally, you would say this kid was that became an adult was meant to do this. However, you did have a normal Jeff as a 20-year-old man that probably thought a lot in the ways that normal 20-year-olds would think and do and be. And now this guy, how has that changed? What are the things have you seen that you're really happy to say, I'm this new Jeff Carriera that's
Mm.
like a gift? What is that? Tell us about that.
Yeah, I'll tell you a little bit about it. Uh, I always had this spiritual interest. When I was young, I used to try to stop my mind from thinking. I used to look up at the stars and get rushes of energy through my body. As a teenager, I was always trying to understand what reality was all about. When I was 29, I joined a spiritual community so that I could do practice. I left my career, I left my life, and I joined a spiritual community. And I just did enormous amounts of practice. 10 years later, on a retreat, I was sitting in a retreat. I was meditating with my eyes open. I was looking at the floor, and suddenly I started to float up toward the ceiling. But I realized, oh, I'm not floating, I'm expanding. I'm getting bigger.
Mm,
And I
mm,
got so big that my head went through the ceiling. I went up and I went up until I was as big as the whole universe.
wow.
And at that size, all the stars and planets and galaxies were inside my body. They were my body. I was the cosmic being. And all I felt was pure love, just an intensity of love.
Ooh,
And I remember thinking, I'm finally home. And and when I had that thought, and then I came back down to my regular size. But as I was coming back down, I remembered that I used to do this all the time when I was about 3 or 4 years old, as you said, looking into the bathroom mirror in my parents' house and blowing up to the size of the cosmos and feeling this intense love and knowing that I was home and then shrinking back down. And I would do it regularly because that's what allowed me to live in the world. That's what allowed me to live in so much constriction, because my physical reality felt so constricted compared to my ultimate cosmic reality. And everything made sense after that. Because before that, I never knew why I cared so much. Why did I care so much about spirituality? Why did I leave my career, my wife at the time, to join a pretty crazy spiritual community? I mean, it didn't actually make any sense logically, and I knew it didn't make any sense even at the time. But something was calling me. Something was demanding that I do that. And then I understood this is why. It's because I was born with some memory of who I was before I was born. And I wanted to know that in this lifetime.
wow.
And so one thing I can say, you said, how did it change me? I mean, there's so many ways it changed me, but one way that it changed me is at some point I realized that before I was born, I was a free floating source of awareness. I was just awareness. And then I was born into a human body. And I knew that when this human body completes, I will be a free floating form of awareness again until the next human body.
Mm,
And that was not just a deduction. That was just I saw it. I saw who I was before I was born. I knew who I would be after I died. And anything like a fear of death just dissolved off out of my system. There was just no worry about death anymore because
yeah.
there was no death.
That's wonderful. That sounds like knowing. And
Hmm.
and I know that everybody's spiritual path is not the same of what is that crossover where you cross into just a higher uh, awareness, and that's just so beautiful. But do you teach that to other people in your mastery classes and such as that on how that they can find that for themselves?
Yes, I definitely do. I have a mystery school, which you can find on my site. So this is an ongoing group of people, and I am working with the whole group, uh, and sharing what I have discovered, but not just sharing. It's very my path was a very practice based path. I did an enormous amount of practice, so I inspire people to make the effort to do the kinds of practices that will shift you out of the assumptions that limit you into recognitions that will liberate your spirit and unleash your potential. And I do it methodically and consistently, and it's exactly what I live for.
Mm, that's wonderful. That's if you're not tempted by that, folks, I don't know what's going to tempt you. Uh, that is wonderful. And we're coming to the end of the show, and I want you to just think about a 1 to 2 minute message that you could give to everybody, as a parting words. And while we're thinking about this, this is you're listening to Jeff Carriera, and he is the author of Transdimensional Spirituality and The Path of Cosmic Consciousness, and other books that you can buy either on his website, or if you just go to some of the sites where you can buy books, or even bookstores. How archaic is that? But I love them. I love to still go into bookstores and get a cup of coffee and browse around. There's something so magical about that. But you can get all of this stuff. You can go to his workshops, and you can go to the internet and get on the mastery courses and all of that great stuff. My name is Bart Sharp, and you are on Becoming Quantum Conscious at United Public Radio Network and UFO Paranormal Radio Network on 107.7, 105.3 out of New Orleans, and also on Roku, X, Facebook, YouTube, and the UPRN website. So, Jeff, oh yes, one more thing. Next week we will have Stacy Nicole Haynes, and we will be talking about masculinity and femininity, how you bring those together to become more whole and true with yourself. That will be a lot of fun. So, what parting words, Jeff, do you have for everybody?
I'll leave a very short statement to contemplate, and it's simply, you are much more than you think you are. So I will leave people with that to think about. You are much more than you think you are.
Yes, that is so wonderful. I enjoy it. Almost brings a silence in me. And that's where you begin. It's finding that place. Thank you for so much for
Absolutely.
being on the show today. That's been
Thank you so
wonderful.
much, Bart. That's wonderful. It's wonderful to be here.
Yes, and we'll see everybody next week at Becoming Quantum Conscious. Until next Wednesday, I hope y'all have a great week. And we'll catch y'all all later. Bye bye for now.
Bye bye. Bye bye.